What's really happening, according to our energy secretary, is this.
Our oil and gas producers have a responsibility. We're on a war footing. The price of oil, the price of gas is precipitating the high cost, the high percentage of inflation around the world. And so he's asking upon our domestic and international producers to produce more. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has caused the price of gas in the United States to go up $1.70 a gallon since the invasion occurred. Ultimately, the solution to make us energy secure, to make the Baltic states energy secure, to make the entire world energy secure, is to move to clean energy. No country has ever been held hostage to access to the sun or to access to the wind.
Oh, now you may be asking yourself, why would you put someone like that, who's never had a real job and achieved precisely nothing in her life and actually doesn't know anything about anything, why would you put her in a key position like Secretary of Energy? Because she knows the science. As she just told you, sun and wind are the most reliable forms of energy. It's not like clouds could block the sun or the wind might stop blowing. That's insane. And don't think about nuclear power ramping up domestic energy production. That's what Putin wants you to do. So to keep our democracy safe, we can't do anything that helps Putin.
Good morning from Athens, Greece. It is around 8:30 here on this Thursday morning. We have got a ton of news to talk about, but I will summarize this video in these few words. Putin is to blame for everything. It is all Putin's fault. That is the theme of this video and of this news cycle. So one of the big news stories yesterday was that the Fed raised interest rates by 0.75%, 75 basis points. This is the largest increase of interest rates via the Fed that we've seen since in the last 28 years, I believe. And the Fed is not done. They have stated that in the next meeting, they could raise interest rates by another 50 to 75 basis points as well. This is not going to be enough, and everyone understands this is not going to be enough to solve the terrible inflation problem that is plaguing the United States and plaguing much of the collective West. But it is a Band-Aid that has been placed on a gaping wound, and short term it's going to provide a little bit of relief, just a little bit of breathing room. But the interesting part about the Fed's statements that they made yesterday as they announced this interest rate hike was that Putin is to blame for everything that is happening. It's all Putin's fault. This virus, this blame Putin for everything, this virus has infected everybody in the Biden White House, everybody, including Jerome Powell. So the Fed committee actually came out with a statement, and they said that much of what is happening in the U.S., the 40-year high inflation problem, is Moscow's fault. They blamed the invasion of Ukraine for creating, and this is a direct quote, for creating additional upward pressure on inflation. The Fed also said that the Kiev lockdowns in China are likely to exacerbate supply chain disruptions around the world. So the 2-year lockdowns, the massive amount of money poured into the U.S. economy, the printing of all those dollars when the lockdowns were lifted, and we put the coup, supposedly we put the coup behind us. All this money that was poured into the economy by the Biden White House in order to get to some Green New Deal utopia. This has nothing to do with inflation, nothing to do with all of the economic woes. It is all Putin's fault, and it's all due to Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And that's going to be a sentence you're going to probably hear a lot as I get through this video. It is all Putin's fault. Everything can be traced back to Putin's invasion of Ukraine. So the other big news story that came out yesterday, and this one really should be the clown world, but it's such an important news story that I have to push it up to to the beginning of the video, and it has to do with Biden's threatening letter to big oil. So the Biden White House actually thought it would be a good idea to write all the major oil companies, Chevron, BP American, ExxonMobil, Shell USA, Phillips 66, Marathon, and Valero, to send them an angry, threatening letter warning them that if they don't boost their refinery output, then the Biden White House is going to start punishing big oil, and it's going to use all the power of the executive to punish big oil. They actually thought this is a good idea, and they sent this letter out to big oil. Of course, this letter is public, and this is all one big PR stunt, in my opinion. It's just trying to shift the blame once again to Putin and to big oil, and to push along the green agenda. Once again, distract everybody, blame it on Putin, blame it on big oil, and push along the green agenda, because the only thing that's going to save us now, according to the Biden White House, is green energy. That's the only thing that's going to save us. But Biden said this. He said in his letter, "I understand that many factors contributed to the business decisions to reduce refinery capacity, which occurred before I took office." Then Biden further adds that at a time of war, refinery profit margins well above normal being passed directly onto American families are not acceptable. My administration is prepared to use all reasonable and appropriate federal government tools and emergency authorities to increase refinery capacity and output in the near term, and to ensure that every region of this country is appropriately supplied. In the letter, Biden then went on to actually scapegoat Putin and blame Putin for the energy price increases. He said, "Vladimir Putin's price hikes are driving up costs for consumers. I appreciate your immediate attention to this issue and your efforts to mitigate the economic challenges that Vladimir Putin's actions have created for American families." He says Putin twice in this paragraph. He says Vladimir Putin's price hike twice. And he says here, specifically says, that it's Vladimir Putin's actions that have created problems for American families. Zero Hedge says this: declining U.S. refinery capacity has nothing to do with Putin's actions in Ukraine, but instead Democrats and Wall Street, who've been on a crusade over the last several years pushing for a transition to a low-carbon economy that disincentivized oil companies from reinvesting and expanding refinery capacity. Instead, oil companies were forced to slash capacity by upwards of 1 million barrels from April 2020 to 17.95 million barrels per day as of June. Big Oil responded to Biden. They did not let the letter go unanswered, and the American Petroleum Institute, which represents big oil, sent a letter to Biden, and they offered the U.S. president some advice. Here is what their letter said. Quote, "Unfortunately, Russia's actions and the instability it created has contributed to an already forming global energy crisis." Let me stop there. Big oil is getting it wrong. It was not Russia's actions in Ukraine that has caused this oil global energy crisis. It was the sanctions placed on Russia that has caused this global energy crisis. These were decisions made by the Biden White House and by the European Union, because they actually believed that if they put these shock and awe sanctions on Russia, that they would get regime change in the Kremlin. That is what has caused this global energy crisis. Not the invasion of Ukraine, the sanctions that followed the invasion of Ukraine. And those were decisions made, political decisions, not economic decisions. Those were political decisions made by the White House and by the European Union, because they actually thought they would get regime change in Russia, and they were wrong. That is why we have this global energy crisis. So even this letter is getting it all wrong. Anyway, I continue. Several factors have led to a significant and sustained supply and demand imbalance in global oil markets. Demand for energy, specifically crude oil, has surged as global economies have rebounded from the early part of the COVID pandemic. In part, supplies have not kept pace due to global underinvestment in recent years, driven by geopolitical and market forces, public policies, and investor sentiment. This combination of factors and events leaves us in the situation we face today, namely the most consequential energy crisis since the 1970s. And then the letter goes on to suggest, I believe, 10 points. Yes, 10 suggestions, 10 things that the Biden White House can do to lower gas prices for the average consumer. And in this list of, and I'll put a link to this article down below so you can see this list. In this list of suggestions, I see one big action that the Biden White House can do, which is not on this list, but which will significantly reduce the price of oil and gas, which will actually help the global economy. One thing that they can do, which they will never do, but which they could do right away, and it'll fix a lot of the problems that we are facing in the economy. And that one thing that the Biden White House can do, and that the European Union can do, is lift all the sanctions they have placed on Russia and Belarus. Lift those sanctions. Do it tomorrow. Cancel all of them. You do that, and you're going to fix many, many of the problems that the Biden White House has created due to these sanctions. So that's the one thing that they could do. They'll never do, and they're actually going to place more and more sanctions on Russia because there is no reverse gear. But that is the one suggestion that is not in this letter from the oil companies to the Biden White House, but it's the one thing that they can do to solve much of these issues. So, as Biden was threatening big oil, I say the word and I still can't believe it. As the Biden White House was threatening big oil, they also decided to send $1 billion to Ukraine, $1 billion in military aid to the Zelensky government. It's going to be $1 billion that is not going to change the trajectory of this conflict. It's not going to make a difference whatsoever to the fact that the Zelensky regime is collapsing. But in order to take some heat off of the Biden White House coming from the neocons and from the Clinton Nuland camp, Biden signed off on this package. And this package also includes the game changer anti-ship missiles, the Harpoon anti-ship missiles, which the Zelensky regime has been begging for the past, say, month. The nearly $1 billion more in military aid to Ukraine will include vehicle-mounted Harpoon anti-ship missiles. It will include $320 million for secure radios and related equipment. It will include $55 million for thermal night vision optics, and it'll include $160 million for training. Didn't Biden just yesterday give an angry speech where he was upset that people were critiquing him for his reckless spending? And then he said that the Biden White House is changing people's lives. Just yesterday, he was upset that he was being unfairly critiqued for reckless spending. And then he sends a letter to big oil, and he threatens big oil, and he threatens them with the power of the federal government, and he's going to put price caps and taxes and all of these things, like that's going to help the situation. And then he signs off $1 billion in military aid to Ukraine. Not $1 billion to help the American people, but $1 billion in military aid to Zelensky, which is going to make no difference in this conflict. None whatsoever. So, since we're talking about Ukraine, let's talk about a report from Bloomberg. This is just a report. It hasn't been confirmed, but today, supposedly, you're going to have an unannounced surprise trip to Kiev by Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany, Macron, the President of France, Ioannis, the President of Romania, and who else? And Draghi, the unelected, the unelected leader, the Goldman Sachs, ECB, European Central Banker, unelected leader of Italy. All these guys are going to make an unannounced surprise visit to Kiev. Now, what are they going to talk about? Well, according to Bloomberg, Scholz and Macron in particular are grappling with the challenge of maintaining unwavering support for the government in Kiev while formulating a realistic, longer-term plan for how to deal with Russia when its war in Ukraine ends. So I think that sentence, so let's go down this way. I think that sentence says it all. Macron, Scholz, Ioannis, Draghi, they're going to Ukraine because they're in search of some sort of off-ramp. Now, I don't know what they're expecting to get from Zelensky. I don't know what answers they're expecting to get from Zelensky, because he's not the one running the show. But they're going to Kiev to find a way to get out of this mess. No doubt about it. That line for when the war in Ukraine ends, that line from Bloomberg to me signals that that Macron, Draghi, Scholz, and Ioannis, they want a way out. And look at the countries that are going. Look at the economies of those countries that are going. All four of those countries are in a world of hurt from this conflict and from the sanctions that they placed on Russia. Now, according to Bloomberg, Olaf Scholz has also had to deal with accusations at home and abroad that Germany, as Europe's richest economy, is failing to provide enough military equipment to support Ukraine's defense, a charge that the German leader rejects. So I said this about a month ago when I was in Cyprus, that Olaf Scholz would have to go to Kiev. It was unavoidable. He's going to have to make a trip there. He's going to have to meet with Zelensky. And sure enough, he is going to Kiev to meet with Zelensky. Now, the fact that he's going with Macron and Draghi Ioannis is a good compromise for Olaf Scholz. The optics are a little better than him going there by himself and groveling at Zelensky's feet. Now he's going to go there with a delegation of other world leaders, and it doesn't look as pathetic or as desperate. So this is actually a pretty good compromise for Olaf Scholz. The trip was unavoidable. He had to go to Kiev. All the world leaders have gone to Kiev. He had to go. The fact that he's coupling it with these other three guys is a better look for him. It's a better look for him. So let's, by the way, Ukraine actually said that with this Gazprom issue, Ukrainian gas transmission systems operator, GTS, has said on Wednesday that it was ready to increase the volume of gas transit through the Sudza entry point to supply Europe. And this comes after Gazprom had to decrease gas supplies to Europe by 40% because they have these gas pumping units that Siemens was supposed to send to Gazprom. They should have been repaired and sent to Gazprom, but the Canadian company that is repairing these gas pumping units, they said that they can't send them to Russia because of sanctions, and so Gazprom had to decrease the gas going into Nord Stream 1 by 40%. And so now you have the Ukraine gas company saying, you know what, we can increase the gas flowing via Ukraine into Europe. And of course, Ukraine is going to siphon off any gas that's increased through the delivery of pipelines via its territory to Europe. So that's a very clever proposal from Ukraine, but I don't think the Russians are going to take them up on that offer, because I think the Russians know that this offer to increase gas via Ukraine pipelines is actually a way for Ukraine to siphon off more gas that's heading towards Europe. One person that's really upset with what Gazprom has done by decreasing 40% of the gas going to Europe is the green energy. He's like the energy minister, as well as like the vice or deputy chancellor, Robert Habeck. He has said that this move by Gazprom was politically motivated. Quote, "I have the impression that what happened yesterday is a political decision and not a decision that could be justified in technical terms." I find it very funny that that Habeck, out of all people, Habeck, the German minister who has been pushing for war and escalating sanctions since day one for political reasons, because he thought he could get regime change in Russia, that this guy is now blaming Gazprom for taking a political decision by reducing the gas, when in fact the reality of the situation is that it's actually Canada that is preventing these pumping units for going to Germany and to Russia because of the sanctions that Canada has placed on Russia. So in reality, this is actually Canada sanctioning Germany from getting Nord Stream 1 gas. That is, in a strange kind of roundabout way, that is exactly what is happening here. Canada is preventing Germany from getting gas via Nord Stream 1 because of sanctions on Russia. So Canada, in essence, is sanctioning Germany. So Habeck should really be upset at Canada and Trudeau. That would be the right thing for Habeck to do, to come out with a statement and say Trudeau is blocking gas from coming to Germany. And that is a political decision. Canada's sanctions on Russia are a political decision, so it's Canadian politics that are causing this problem, not Russian politics. Saying that, I think we can wrap up this video. Let me see if I have anything else to go over. No, I think we can wrap up this video with a clown world. And this clown world comes from the Washington Post with an article with the title, "For Ukrainian Troops, Anita Rises, Javelin Customer Service." The powerful anti-tank weapons have come to symbolize U.S. involvement in Ukraine, but critics say the Pentagon's support service is lacking. Those Javelin missiles, boy, those Javelin missiles have really come to symbolize the U.S. weapon involvement in Ukraine. No doubt about it. Those Javelin missiles. But unfortunately, those Javelin missiles don't have a good customer service and support line for the Ukrainian troops. The Ukrainians had an urgent problem. Their Javelin missile launchers, sophisticated, finicky gear, each costing six figures, were inoperable and no one in the unit could fix them. They sought help from two Americans who engineered a fix for one by cannibalizing electric components from a video game controller, said Mark Hayward, a U.S. veteran and volunteer trainer. The others, he said, were thought to be broken until it was discovered that the user instructions had gotten gummed up in Google Translate. Hayward recalled the episode with profound frustration that the Pentagon, which has rushed more than 5,000 javelins to Ukraine, hasn't done more to ensure that those battling Russian forces have help when such needs arise. In other words, this article goes on to explain how the Javelin missiles, they don't have proper instructions and they don't have a proper help support line. Like a 1-800 number or something like that, so that the Ukraine military can call up the Pentagon or Lockheed Martin or Raytheon, because I believe it's Raytheon and Lockheed Martin that are involved with the Javelins. You have to call up their support line and get help right before they fire these missiles. This is crazy stuff. So this whole Washington Post article is making the argument that the military-industrial complex, what they really need to do is they need to put better instructions in place, and they need to put better customer support in place so that the Ukraine military can more effectively fight the Russians. They have to, before they fire the javelins, they have to call up Lockheed Martin and get some questions answered. Anyway, that is the video, guys. Check out Alexander's channel, check out the Duran's channel, and go to the Duran.locals.com. I am signing out from Athens, Greece. Take care.